Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A human soldier married an alien girl without knowing he would be sharing a bed with her sisters. Captain Rylan had faced plasma storms, the kind that ripped apart whole fleets and left only glowing wreckage spinning through the void. But marriage was supposed to be simpler. At least, that was what he told himself as he stood stiffly in ceremonial armor that smelled faintly of ozone and moth dust, wondering if he was supposed to bow, salute, or maybe just nod politely at the alien priest, whose head looked like a collection of antennae shoved into a helmet. Lysera was beautiful in a way that made him feel clumsy. She looked human at first glance, tall, slender, dark hair that shimmered as though strands of starlight were woven into it. But the long, tapered ears gave her away. They twitched faintly when the priest droned on in a language that sounded like wind moving through broken glass. Every twitch seemed to echo her thoughts more loudly than words ever could. When Rylan had first met her during treaty negotiations, she'd barely spoken above a whisper, but her ears had done most of the talking. Now, standing beside her, he thought he saw nerves, or maybe annoyance. Hard to tell when you didn't have the ears for context. The vows were mercifully short. The priest waved a crystal rod. The air flickered with blue sparks, and someone shoved a cup of glowing nectar into Rylan's hand. He drank, tried not to choke on the fizzing sensation, and realized belatedly that this was the alien equivalent of champagne. Lysera sipped gracefully, ears twitching once in amusement when Rylan coughed like a recruit on his first ration beer. Then, with the efficiency of a planetary tax officer, the priest announced them bonded and stepped aside. That was it. No music, no applause, just the faint hum of anti-gravity engines, holding the ceremonial platform steady above the gas giant below. Rylan followed Lysera into what he assumed was their chamber. The door hissed shut behind them, sealing with a sound that made him think of airlocks and bad ideas. The room was huge, filled with soft glowing orbs that hovered lazily in the air, casting ripples of gold and violet light. A bed dominated the center, wide enough to land a shuttle on. He tried to smile. Well, that wasn't so bad. I've survived worse. Once ate a field ration that moved on its own, and this was still less terrifying. Lysera tilted her head, silver eyes watching him carefully. She opened her mouth as though to speak, then paused. The ears twitched once, twice, and she said softly, "You are brave. Or foolish. Hard to tell." Before he could answer, the door slid open again. 3 figures entered, moving with a kind of synchronized confidence that made Rylan instinctively reach for a weapon he no longer carried. They looked like Lysera, but different in subtle ways. One had a mischievous smirk and a stride that practically shouted trouble. Another carried herself straight-backed, sharp-eyed, every step precise, like a commander inspecting her troops. The last seemed distracted, gaze already locked onto the lights, as though calculating how they hovered and whether she could dismantle one. Rylan blinked. Hello? Wrong room, maybe?" The mischievous one laughed. "Wrong room? No, human. This is exactly the right room." Lysera's ears dipped low, betraying something between embarrassment and resignation. She finally explained, voice careful, "Our custom, no sisters left without bond. You married me. You married them." Rylan's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He ran through half a dozen battlefield responses, none of which fit the moment. "I married 4 of you." The serious one crossed her arms. "Is that a problem? You look sturdy enough, at least on the outside." The tinkerer had already reached him, crouching to tap the plating of his boots. "Interesting alloy. Conducts well. Can I take it apart?" Rylan took a step back. "No, absolutely not. These are standard issue. Very standard. Regulation boots." The mischievous one leaned against the massive bed, grin widening. "He's cute when he panics. I like this one." Rylan raised a hand, voice climbing an octave higher than he liked. "Hold on, this wasn't in the treaty briefing. Nobody said anything about multipack marriages." Lysera finally sighed, as if she'd been dreading this. "We thought you understood. Our families are woven. To bond one sister is to bind all." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the room. Rylan tried to think logically. He'd handled worse surprises, Ambushes, mutinies, a plasma cannon jamming mid-fight. For alien wives wasn't even in the top 10 of tactical nightmares. Probably. He pinched the bridge of his nose. All right. Fine. Just one rule. Personal space. I don't share pillows. Military regulation. The mischievous one smirked. We'll see. The serious one studied him like a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. You will adapt. The tinkerer was still circling, muttering about alloys. Lysera's ears twitched in quiet apology. Rylan sat heavily on the edge of the shuttle-sized bed, staring at the glowing walls. You know, I always thought the strangest thing marriage would bring was in-laws, not co-wives with long ears and a fascination for my boots. The mischievous one grinned. Welcome to the family, human. And for the first time since the ceremony began, Rylan realized he might actually prefer plasma storms. At least plasma storms didn't insist on sharing your blanket. Rylan woke to the sound of arguing. Not the muffled kind soldiers used when they didn't want their commander to hear, but the sharp, unapologetic kind that suggested this was normal morning conversation. He opened one eye and immediately regretted it. The bed was no longer a bed but a battlefield, occupied by four sisters sprawled at odd angles, each with her own strategy for blanket acquisition. Lysera had claimed a neat square at his side, serene as if she hadn't moved all night. The mischievous one, whose name he thought was Serena, but who answered to anything if it annoyed him, had wrapped herself in enough fabric to look like a cocoon. The serious sister, Kaylee's, had positioned herself with military precision across the edge, leaving Rylan's legs dangling. The tinkerer, Lysera, had taken the pillow from under his head and was currently dissecting it. Rylan groaned. Do you people always wake up like this? Serena grinned from her fabric fortress. This? Oh no, this is civilized. You should see what happens when we run out of breakfast. Lysera held up a fistful of pillow stuffing. Fascinating material. Insulates heat better than carbon foam. Could line a shuttle with this. That's my pillow, Rylan muttered. Kaylee's ignored them all, already dressed in something that resembled armor. She was staring at a glowing panel on the wall, lines of data flickering across it. Raider spotted in the northern storm band. Council will debate response later today. We should attend. Rylan rubbed his eyes. Raiders? And you're just calmly announcing that like it's the weather. Lysera stirred at last, her voice soft but steady. It is both. Raiders come often. Like storms. You adjust. Rylan sat up, trying to restore some kind of authority to the day. All right, let's be clear. I'm a captain in the Terran fleet. I've commanded ships through asteroid sieges and survived a boarding party of cyborg mercs. I can handle raiders, but I need order, discipline, structure. Serena yawned dramatically. He sounds like Kaylee's. This is adorable. Kaylee's ears flicked in irritation, though her expression remained sharp. At least one of you understands order. Order, Serena smirked. I think he just wants more blanket space. Rylan threw his hands up. Yes, that too. Breakfast was worse. The chamber shifted seamlessly into a dining hall when Lysera pressed her palm to a panel, the bed folding into the floor, while a glowing table rose in its place. Platters appeared as if conjured. Strips of something that looked like bacon but emitted faint sparks when touched, fruit spheres that floated above the dishes until you caught them, and a jug of liquid that shifted colors every time you blinked. Rylan eyed the sparking bacon. Is this safe? Lysera nodded. Very nutritious. Increases stamina. Serena winked. Good for bonding nights. Rylan nearly choked on his first bite. Kaylee shot Serena a glare sharp enough to cut metal. Lysera, meanwhile, was holding her fruit sphere under the table, muttering calculations about its anti-gravity field. The table quickly turned into a council. Kaylee's demanded preparations for the raider threat, citing patrol routes and defense grid weaknesses. Rylan tried to contribute with military insight, suggesting formation tactics. Serena interrupted every few minutes with jokes, while Lysera interrupted with questions like, what if we let them in and track their ships instead? Lysera spoke rarely, but when she did, everyone quieted. By the time the plates cleared themselves and the table sank back into the floor, Rylan realized two things. First, that he had lost every vote, and second, that the sisters treated strategy sessions like casual banter over coffee. Later, they took him into the city. Rylan had seen many capitals, steel fortresses, glass towers, orbiting stations, but nothing like this. Platforms floated above the swirling storms of the gas giant, linked by bridges of light. Buildings seemed to grow rather than be built, their surfaces alive, with faint pulses. Anti-gravity skimmers darted overhead, while energy fields shimmered against the horizon where storms raged. Serena leaned close, whispering, "Try not to look so odd. Locals will think you're a tourist." "I am a tourist," Rylan muttered. Lysera smiled faintly. "Not anymore. You are family now." That word still lodged in his chest like shrapnel. Family. He hadn't thought much about family since he left Earth. Now it followed him everywhere, in the form of four sisters who bickered, teased, and plotted around him, like a miniature fleet he could never command. At the council chamber, the atmosphere turned sharp. Alien leaders filled the room, their ears twitching in patterns Rylan couldn't follow. Holograms of the raider fleet spun above them, sleek black ships armed with plasma drills designed to pierce floating platforms. Discussions erupted in their melodic, glassy language. Rylan caught only fragments, but he understood the weight. The raiders were coming soon. When he offered his insight, human fleet formations that could outmaneuver heavier ships, some counselors sneered. "A human teaching us defense," one muttered. "Your people bond one-to-one. You do not understand unity." Rylan's jaw clenched, but before he could reply, Kaylee's rose. Her voice was cold steel. "He may be human, but he is ours." The chamber rippled with murmurs. Serena added cheerfully, "And he snores, but we're keeping him anyway." Even Lysera's lips twitched at that. Lysera just asked if she could have one of the raider ships intact for study. Rylan stood there, feeling both absurd and unexpectedly proud. Maybe he didn't understand their unity yet. Maybe he never would. But for the first time, he felt like the word ours wasn't just a trap. It might be the beginning of something worth fighting for. Rylan had been in firefights where ammunition screamed past his ears and bulkheads trembled under impact, but nothing compared to the chaos of trying to coordinate four sisters during a training drill. The council had permitted him a unit of 20 soldiers, half human volunteers stationed nearby, half locals from Lysera's world, and Rylan thought a joint exercise would strengthen trust. What he got instead was the most bewildering morning of his military career. The plan was simple. Simulate a raider boarding party on one of the floating defense platforms. Humans would play attackers, locals the defenders. Rylan explained the rules twice, outlined maneuvers on a holographic map, and assigned roles. Then Serena raised her hand. "Can I be the raider captain? I already have the smirk for it." "No," Rylan said, "but my smirk is very convincing." She demonstrated. It was indeed convincing, convincingly annoying. Kaylee's cut in, voice sharp. "This is serious. Raiders won't stop to admire your smirk." "They might," Serena shot back. "Depends on the lighting." Lysera, crouched under the hologram projector, muttered, "If I bypass the safeties, I could make the simulation more realistic. Explosions. Collapsing bridges. Smoke. Absolutely not." Rylan barked, already imagining the paperwork. Lysera finally spoke, quiet but firm. "Perhaps let him lead. It is his strength." For a brief, shining moment, Rylan felt supported. Then Serena whispered loudly, "Translation. Do what the human says before he explodes." The drill began, and chaos unfolded instantly. The human volunteers advanced in neat formation, rifles raised, while the local defenders spread out in unpredictable, fluid lines. Serena, against orders, somehow commandeered a skimmer drone and began dive-bombing everyone while shouting, "Pillage! Loot!" Kaylee's tried to counter with disciplined tactics, but ended up yelling at 3 defenders, who stopped mid-combat, to debate formation philosophy. Lysera's minor modifications to the holographic environment caused a walkway to collapse, sending 2 soldiers tumbling into a harmless but humiliating gravity net. Rylan was in the middle, shouting commands that half the unit ignored. When the simulation ended, the battlefield looked like a market after a lightning storm. Soldiers lay tangled in nets. Drones circled drunkenly overhead, and the smell of overheated circuits filled the air. Rylan pressed his hands to his temples. That was not the objective. Serena hopped off her drone, grinning. We won, though. Raiders always win first round. No, Rylan said flatly. Nobody won. Everyone lost. Especially me. Lysera held up a melted circuit. But I learned this component fails under stress. Valuable data. Kaylee's looked ready to strangle them both, but Lysera stepped forward, her calm presence cutting through the noise. It was not perfect, but it was together. The human volunteers looked bewildered, the local defenders looked smug, and Rylan wondered if this was what interspecies diplomacy always felt like. That evening, back in their chamber, he tried to reassert control. He spread maps across the massive table, outlining real raider strategies, pointing at potential weak points in the Stormband defense grid. Kaylee's listened intently, nodding, occasionally correcting him with local details. Lysera sat quietly, her gaze thoughtful, occasionally offering a soft comment that cut deeper than any tactical observation. Lysera fiddled with a miniature drone that buzzed dangerously close to the table. Serena lay sprawled across the maps themselves, arms folded behind her head. Could you move? Rylan asked. I am strategically blocking the raider advance, Serena replied. You're lying on my map. And saving lives while doing it. Kaylee snapped. Serena, move. Fine. She slid off the table, grabbing one of the fruit spheres from a dish as she went. It floated just out of reach until she bit it midair. Rylan rubbed his forehead. This isn't going to work if you don't take it seriously. Lysera looked at him, ears tilting slightly. You take everything seriously. Perhaps too much. He blinked. Too much. This is life and death. Her gaze softened, but her words were firm. Yes, but also life. Without laughter, we forget why we defend. For once, Serena didn't add a joke. Even Lysera paused her tinkering. Kaylee shifted uncomfortably, as if the thought unsettled her. Rylan let the silence sit. He had spent years believing survival came from discipline, orders, and precision. Yet here were four sisters who fought like chaos and laughed through disaster. And somehow, despite everything, they held their world together. The next day, the council announced that raider fleets had been sighted closer than expected. Patrols confirmed they were massing near the outer rings. The chamber filled with tension, leaders debating whether to fortify or strike first. Rylan offered a bold plan. Lure the raiders into the Stormbands, where violent lightning could cripple their shields. Human fleets had used similar traps, but the council doubted him, murmuring about human recklessness. Then Kaylee's rose, her voice carrying authority. I have seen his methods. They work. He is not reckless. He is ours. Lysera stood beside her, calm as always. He brings something different. That difference may save us. Lysera piped up. And I want a raider ship intact. Serena leaned back in her chair, smirking. Plus, if it fails, we can blame him. Win-win. Laughter rippled through the chamber, easing the tension. Rylan managed a weary smile. He wasn't sure if this was trust or just collective madness. But for the first time, the council agreed to test his strategy. That night, as storms rolled beneath their floating city, Rylan lay awake, the bed crowded as always. Serena stole his blanket again. Lysera muttered calculations in her sleep. Kaylee's radiated restless energy even unconscious, and Lysera curled quietly against him. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the storm outside. Maybe, just maybe, this strange family could fight together and win. Rylan had expected resistance from the raiders. He had expected the Stormbands to test their shields, the gravity fluxes to toss ships like toys, and the council to hesitate at every turn. What he had not expected was to be dragged into a family argument about seating arrangements on the command deck before the operation even began. Kaylee's insisted on standing beside him to monitor the tactical display. Serena demanded the same spot because it has the best lighting for my heroic expressions. Lysera wanted the console itself so she could tinker with the shield harmonics, while Lysera quietly suggested maybe they should all just sit down before the ship launched. Rylan, caught between four determined voices, finally shouted over them. Fine. Kaylee's on my left, Serena on my right. Lysera one console over, Lysera anywhere she wants. No more debates. We're about to fight raiders, not host a dinner party. Serena smirked. Every good battle is also a dinner party if you survive it. The human volunteers and local crew tried not to stare as the sisters settled into their places. Rylan cleared his throat, forcing his voice into command mode. Focus. Raiders are massing at the edge of the storm. Their hulls are reinforced, but their shields can't handle prolonged lightning strikes. We'll lure them deeper, then collapse the field behind them. Classic trap, executed flawlessly, assuming nobody decides to improvise. 3 pairs of long ears tilted toward Serena. She gasped dramatically. What? Why is everyone looking at me? I haven't even done anything yet. The fleet advanced. Human cruisers formed the bait, weaving close to raider lines, firing just enough to draw pursuit. Raider ships surged forward, sleek and black, plasma drills glowing with the promise of stolen resources. Rylan watched the tactical display, every nerve on edge. The storm ahead raged with violet arcs of lightning, swirling clouds that bent gravity itself. Perfect hunting ground if the timing was right, and a graveyard if it wasn't. Kaylee's relayed orders with crisp precision. Left flank, adjust bearing. Keep them close. Do not break formation. Serena leaned toward the comm, and remember to look intimidating. Raiders respect confidence. Growl if necessary. Serena, Rylan warned. What? I'm helping. Lysera interrupted, eyes glued to her console. I can shift the harmonics of our shields to resonate with the storm. It will make the lightning stronger against them, but it might also fry our systems. Rylan groaned. Why is it always, but it might also fry us with you? Lysera's calm voice cut through the tension, because progress often carries risk. The trap snapped shut. Raiders chased the human cruisers into the storm band, lightning lashing their shields in blinding arcs. The fleet split, weaving between gravity rifts, while Rylan gave the order. Now, collapse the field. Energy surged from the defense platforms hidden along the storm's edge. A net of charged particles snapped into place, cutting off the raiders' retreat. Their ships flailed as lightning tore through them, shields collapsing, hulls shattering. The storm itself became their enemy, dragging wreckage into its depths. For one breathtaking moment, it worked flawlessly. Then Serena leaned toward him, whispering, You know, this would be the perfect time for a dramatic kiss. Rylan didn't even look away from the display. Not helping. Kaylee's ignored her and barked. More raiders incoming. Secondary fleet. The display lit with new signals, larger ships, holding back until their vanguard had tested the trap. They were learning. Rylan's stomach clenched. They're adapting faster than expected. Lysera's fingers flew across her console. If I reroute auxiliary power, I can overload one of the storm channels. It will collapse, dragging their fleet into the vortex. Will it fry us? Rylan asked. Probably, Lysera admitted cheerfully. Lysera's hand touched his arm, grounding him. Sometimes you must trust the storm. He hesitated. Human training screamed caution, precision, control. But his new family thrived on chaos, weaving strength out of unpredictability. Maybe he needed to meet them halfway. He gave the order. Do it. Lysera's console flared with light. Energy arced into the storm, and one of the massive vortexes twisted violently. The raider fleet, caught mid-maneuver, was dragged into its spiraling maw. Ships buckled, plasma drills sputtered, and the storm swallowed them whole. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of their own engines. The crew erupted in cheers. Kaylee's allowed herself a rare, satisfied smile. Serena stretched, yawning. Well, that was fun. Can we do it again? Rylan slumped into his chair. Fun. That nearly killed us. Lysera grinned, soot smudged across her cheek. But it worked. Lysera's silver eyes met his. You trusted us. That is why it worked. Back at the council chamber, praise was mixed with suspicion. Some leaders hailed Rylan's tactics, others muttered about human recklessness. warning that victory through chaos was not sustainable. One even suggested dissolving the Union, claiming a human's influence would fracture their society. Before Rylan could respond, the sisters stood together. Kaylee spoke with fire. "He is not a weakness. He is ours." Serena added brightly, "And honestly, he's entertaining. You should hear him snore." Lysera piped up, "Also, he authorizes dangerous experiments. Very convenient." Lysera's quiet voice silenced them all. "He brings difference. Different saves." The chamber fell into uneasy quiet. Rylan stood there, realizing this was no longer about raiders or storms. It was about belonging, whether one human soldier could find a place in a world that defined unity differently than he had ever known. That night, back in their chamber, Serena stole his blanket again. Lysera muttered about harmonic resonance in her sleep. Kaylee's laid awake plotting future defenses, and Lysera whispered softly, "You are learning." Rylan closed his eyes, exhausted but strangely content. Maybe he was learning. Maybe surviving this family was harder than surviving any battle. And maybe, against all odds, he preferred it that way. The storms cleared more slowly than the cheers. For days, wreckage drifted in the violet bands, glowing faintly as the gas giant consumed what remained of the raiders. Patrols combed the skies, salvage crews picked apart blackened hulls, and the council chambers buzzed with endless debates. But for Rylan, the battle wasn't over. His orders from Earth had finally caught up to him, arriving in the form of a sleek message drone that docked with the platform. He read the transmission 3 times, each word heavier than the last. Return immediately. Termination of alliance considered breach of duty. Exile pending noncompliance. His chest tightened. He had faced death, mutiny, plasma fire, but this felt like the real test. Duty or family? Uniform or unity? The sisters found him staring at the message. Serena snatched the data pad from his hands before he could protest. She skimmed it quickly, whistled, and tossed it back onto the table. "So basically, if you stay with us, you're fired." Kaylee frowned. "Exiled. Dishonored." Lysera tilted her head. "Free for more experiments. Useful." Lysera said nothing, but her ears dipped low, and her eyes lingered on him like a question she was afraid to voice. Rylan forced a laugh that came out sharper than intended. "Guess I should have read the fine print before marrying 4 of you. I don't think multi-alien marital situation is in the Terran handbook." Serena grinned. "If it was, I'd love to read that chapter." But the weight lingered. He spent the day pacing their chamber, the hum of the storm bands outside matching the hum in his chest. He thought of the human fleet, of comrades who would see him as a deserter, of commanders who would brand him reckless. He thought of Lysera's quiet strength, Kaylee's fierce loyalty, Lysera's boundless curiosity, Serena's irreverent humor. He thought of waking up every morning to chaos and laughter instead of silence. When night fell, he made his choice. He stood before the council, his voice steady. "I am Captain Rylan of the Terran fleet. My orders are clear. Return or face exile. But I will not return. My place is here. With them. With you. Not as a soldier of Earth, but as someone who has found a new way to fight, a new way to belong." The chamber erupted, some in outrage, others in support. One counselor shouted that humans could not be trusted. Another argued that Rylan had proven himself in battle. Serena interrupted the noise by standing and declaring, "If you don't let him stay, who's going to snore loud enough to scare away raiders?" Even Kaylee smirked at that, though she quickly hid it behind her usual stern composure. Lysera stepped forward, her voice quiet but piercing. "He chose not only us, but all of you. That choice is unity. That choice is family." Silence fell, and slowly, reluctantly, the council agreed. The human captain would not be cast out. He would stay, not as a commander of fleets, but as part of their woven bonds. The message drone was sent back with no reply. Rylan doubted Earth would understand. Maybe one day they would. For now, it didn't matter. Weeks passed. The city repaired, defenses strengthened, storms calmed. The sisters returned to their patterns, Kaylee's barking orders during drills, Lysera setting off small explosions in the workshop, Serenia trying to teach Rylan how to smirk properly. Lysera always watching, always steady. Rylan found himself changing. He no longer barked orders at breakfast. He laughed when Serenia stole his boots, groaned but allowed Lysera to dismantle one of his rifles for science. Even managed to share a blanket without declaring it a tactical loss. He stopped trying to command them as soldiers and started listening as a husband, or whatever their world's word for it was. One evening, as the storm rolled gently below, the five of them stood together on a platform bridge, light weaving beneath their feet. The horizon glowed with energy, vast and endless. Serenia nudged him with her elbow. So, human worth it? For wives, endless chaos, occasional life-threatening raids. Rylan smiled, not the stiff smile of a soldier, but something looser, freer. Worth it. Every storm, every snore, every stolen blanket. Lysera was already sketching plans for a new kind of shield. Kaylee's was muttering about patrol routes. Lysera slipped her hand into his, quiet as always. For the first time in his life, Rylan didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was living. And when Serenia shouted, "Last one back to the chamber loses blanket privileges," before sprinting down the bridge, he actually laughed and ran after her. The storms raged on, as they always did, but inside the walls of their strange, crowded, impossible marriage, Rylan had found what he never thought possible: peace. The end.